The story of Elvis might have turned out differently if his family had inherited a lot of money when he died. Instead, the Elvis brand was created as a way to make money. If Elvis had been smart about his finances and left behind a lot of stable investments, his family probably wouldn't have turned his image into a business. Graceland would have just been a private home. But Elvis's manager was not honest and didn't make good decisions with Elvis's money. As a result, Elvis's family was left with financial problems instead of a secure future after he died. Elvis Presley's will was filed in court 5 days after he died. The 12-page document was written by his lawyer, Drayton Beecher Smith, and witnessed by Smith's wife, Elvis's fiancée Ginger Alden, and his friend Charlie Hodge. The will covered everything that might happen in the future. Simply put, it said that Lisa Marie, Elvis's only child, would get everything. Her grandfather, Vernon, would take care of her money until she was 25 years old. Vernon and Lisa's great-grandmother, Minnie Mae, would also be provided for as long as they lived. Elvis's ex-wife, Priscilla, and his other friends and girlfriends, including Ginger Alden, were not included in the will. Once Lisa Marie turned 25, she would own everything. The judge, Joseph Evans, thought that Elvis's estate would be the largest in the state's history. Evans knew that Elvis made a lot of money during his lifetime. In some years, he earned more than $5 million, which is the same as earning $30 million today. People thought he should have been the richest entertainer ever. They believed he could have made over $1 billion from his concerts, movies, music, and other business deals. The judge and many others thought that Elvis would have been a multimillionaire by the time he died because of all the money he would continue to make from past work. There were rumors that his daughter, Lisa Marie, was worth $150 million. When the value of Elvis's estate was officially calculated, it surprised the judge and shocked his fans, family, and the media. Elvis had only $1 million left in his bank account, including his properties, jewelry, cars, and other belongings. Elvis's total wealth was only $7 million. A 76-page list was made of all his possessions, including 20 pairs of pajamas. Many of the items on the list were expensive, but they weren't worth much except because they belonged to Elvis. Elvis spent a lot of money even by today's standards. Keeping up his home, Graceland, cost $500,000 every year. He also had to pay many people who worked for him, which added up quickly. Elvis liked to live a fancy life and give his friends and family expensive gifts, but this often left him without enough money. When he died, he was in danger of going broke. After Elvis died, his father Vernon was left in charge of his estate for the benefit of his 9-year-old daughter Lisa Marie. However, Vernon was not well himself and wasn't good with money. In fact, he had even been to jail for a while when he was younger for writing a bad check. He liked the wealth Elvis had given him, but he didn't know how to manage it. So Vernon did what Elvis had done before him and handed over the responsibilities to Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker. Parker had been away when Elvis died, but he quickly came back to Memphis. Instead of coming to pay his respects, Parker brought a contract for Vernon to sign. The colonel told Vernon that from a business perspective, Elvis's death didn't change much, but he knew this wasn't true. When Elvis died, everything changed. Before, the colonel was quietly planning Elvis's next tour around smaller venues where Elvis's weight gain and poor performances wouldn't be as noticeable. But now, the colonel saw an opportunity to make a lot of money from Elvis's death. Vernon, who was already easy to persuade, was in a vulnerable state after Elvis's death. He signed a contract that greatly favored the colonel without putting up a fight. Colonel Parker had a good reason to control Elvis's business closely. He was the only one who knew the real reason why Elvis was in financial trouble. It wasn't just because Elvis spent his money carelessly, although that was part of the problem. The main reason was that the colonel was greedy and took a lot of money from Elvis for himself. For 20 years, Parker had been taking a big share of Elvis's earnings to pay for his own expensive habits, such as his casino debts. When Parker first started working with Elvis, he made some good deals that made Elvis a lot of money. However, these deals were always set up to benefit Parker more than Elvis. At first, Parker took 10% of Elvis's earnings, but over time, he increased this to 50%. Even after Elvis died, Parker still got 50% of the money made from Elvis's music and other business deals. After Elvis's manager, Vernon Presley, died, Elvis's finances needed to be managed for his daughter, Lisa Marie. The court had to choose new people to take care of Lisa Marie's inheritance. Elvis's ex-wife Priscilla, his accountant, and his bank were chosen to do this job. Before this, Priscilla didn't know how bad the financial situation was. She was surprised because everyone thought Elvis had made a lot of money. But when she looked at the finances, she saw that the estate was in trouble. She wondered why nobody had invested the money or saved it for the future. At first, Vernon, Priscilla, and the trustees trusted the colonel and thought he was doing a good job managing Elvis's affairs. In 1979, they wrote to him saying they were happy with his work and wanted him to keep doing it. They expected the court to easily agree to this plan. However, Judge Evans had some concerns. He was surprised to learn how much control the colonel had over the Presleys and how much money he was making from his work. Before making a decision, the judge decided to investigate further. This was a crucial moment in the story of Elvis's estate. If the judge hadn't looked into things, the future of Elvis Presley Enterprises might have turned out very differently. After Elvis died, a lawyer from Memphis named Blanchard Toole was put in charge of taking care of Lisa Marie's finances. He looked closely at how Elvis's business was set up and wrote a detailed report about what he found. Toole was an expert in entertainment law and was very critical of Elvis's business manager, Parker. The report said that Parker had charged Elvis too much money for his services and that this was unfair. The lawyer thought that Parker's 50% cut was too high and wondered if he had been dishonest in his dealings with Elvis. Investigator Toole found many instances where Parker made deals that benefited himself more than his client, Elvis. One example was in 1973, when Parker sold the rights to Elvis's old recordings to the record company RCA for $5.4 million. This was a low price, and it meant that Elvis's estate doesn't get any money from those recordings today. The only royalties they receive are from recordings made after 1973. Parker essentially sold Elvis's future earnings for a low price so he could get his share immediately. After taxes and Parker's cut, Elvis was left with $1.35 million, which he mostly used to pay for his divorce. Additionally, Parker secretly received money from RCA in fees, without telling Elvis. By 1977, Parker owned 56% of Boxcar Enterprises, a company that handled Elvis's merchandising rights. The Presley estate only owned 22%. It's not clear why Elvis didn't own a bigger share of the company, since he was the star and the one who earned the money. One reason might be that Elvis was shy and didn't stand up for himself, while Parker was a tough and clever businessman who got what he wanted. Parker's strong personality was able to control Elvis and the people around him. The colonel took a big share of Elvis's money, but that's not all. He also expected to get gifts from record companies, hotels, and promoters, which he kept to himself. The colonel made many secret deals that benefited him, not Elvis. One example is when he signed a concert deal with a Las Vegas hotel and casino, but instead of getting the best price, he got free gambling credit. This was not a good deal for Elvis. A writer named Alana Nash, who studied the colonel's life, said that the relationship between Elvis and the colonel was like a bad marriage. She thought Elvis was like a wife who stays in the marriage because it's all she knows, even if she's being treated unfairly. The colonel didn't tell Elvis how famous he was, or that other managers didn't take as much money or make secret deals for themselves. The colonel liked it this way because if Elvis knew the truth, he might want to leave him. That's why the colonel didn't want Elvis to hang out with other stars, who might tell him about their own business deals. A report was given to the probate court that showed Parker was badly managing Elvis's business. He was taking a lot of Elvis's money and not making as much as he could. He also didn't do a good job with Elvis's taxes, which meant Elvis paid too much money to the government. The government would estimate how much Elvis owed, and the family would just pay without questioning it. Vernon, Elvis's dad, was partly to blame because he was scared of the government and didn't understand finances. It was also found out later that Parker had his own reasons for not wanting the government to investigate him. The lawyer didn't think twice about telling Lisa Marie that Colonel Parker was not good for her. He said Parker should no longer be involved in her business and that he should pay back all the money he had made from Elvis's business since Elvis passed away. Just 2 days after Elvis's death, Colonel Parker made a deal with a company called Factors Incorporated that allowed them to sell Elvis's name and image. Factors paid Parker $100,000 upfront and promised him $150,000 every year. But when the details of this deal came out, people were very upset with Parker. They accused him of breaking the trust that Elvis had put in him as his manager, and of cheating him even after he died. It appears that Parker, along with RCA, was guilty of cheating and lying to Elvis, and of making unfair deals. These actions were very wrong and hurt the person who was arguably the most popular American musician of the century. The colonel knew he couldn't keep getting money from Elvis's estate forever. A judge ordered that the estate stop paying him and sue him for mismanaging Elvis's business. The colonel didn't give up, even when the record company RCA tried to distance themselves from him. He countered by saying he was Elvis's business partner and deserved half of Elvis's assets. But most people didn't believe this. Those who knew the colonel at the time said he was just trying to drain the estate's money, forcing them to go bankrupt. Parker thought he was in a better financial situation than the estate, so he planned to drag out the court case as long as possible. He hoped that the estate would either rehire him or offer him a lot of money to drop the case. To slow things down, Parker kept moving the case to different courts in different states. This forced the estate to hire teams of lawyers in each place. Parker then revealed a secret that threw the whole process into chaos. He was not who everyone thought he was. His real name was Andreas Cornelius van Keechk, and he was an immigrant from the Netherlands who was in the US illegally. This was why he had always avoided dealing with the government. As the case became more complicated, the Presley estate was running out of money. By the start of 1983, Parker's plan to spend as little money as possible was working. The case had already cost the estate $2 million, which was a huge amount considering the estate was struggling to make ends meet. Elvis wasn't touring anymore, and not much money was coming in from other sources. Even though his music was still popular and people were buying his records, the estate wasn't seeing much of the profit. This was partly because of deals the colonel had made in the past. As a result, the estate was losing money every year, $160,000 by 1981. To make matters worse, the government had valued the estate and estimated how much it owed in taxes since 1977. The estate received a tax bill for $10 million. In 1983, Colonel Parker agreed to give up his claim to Elvis's assets in exchange for a large sum of money, over $2 million, from RCA Records. At the same time, RCA paid the estate $1.1 million in royalties that they had owed since 1973. Everyone involved said they were happy with the agreement. Even though Priscilla must have known that Parker had cost the estate a lot of money and left it in a difficult financial situation, she didn't publicly criticize him. After the colonel and Vernon were out of the picture, Priscilla took charge of Elvis's business for the sake of their daughter. She didn't have any experience with business, but she was smart and tough. She looked at the situation and saw that things were bad. Elvis hadn't gotten the money he should have from record sales, and he had also lost the rights to get paid for arranging songs because the colonel had messed up. This meant the colonel had forgotten to tell the people who collect money from songs that Elvis was involved. As a result, the family might have to sell their big house, Graceland. It was the most valuable thing they owned, and people would probably pay a lot for it because it belonged to Elvis. Priscilla didn't want to sell Graceland, and it would have caused many problems. One issue was what would happen to the family graves. After Elvis died, he was first buried in Forest Hill Cemetery in Memphis. However, because of an attempt to steal his body, he was moved to Graceland. Someone had planned to steal the body and demand $10 million in exchange for its return. The police were tipped off and the plan was stopped. Many years later, one of the people involved admitted that the whole thing was a fake, meant to make it seem like Elvis's body was in danger so it would be moved to Graceland. This turned out to be a clever business move, as Elvis's grave became the main attraction for fans visiting Graceland. When considering selling Graceland, a big problem arose. What would happen to Elvis's grave and those of his family members buried with him? Would they have to be dug up and moved? Fans who had visited the graves were worried about their future. Opening Graceland as a museum was the only other option. At first, Priscilla thought maybe they could just let visitors see a few rooms, like the trophy room and racquetball court, to keep the house feeling like a home. But her advisors said that wouldn't be enough to attract many visitors and make the museum successful. Unfortunately, making money had to come first. Looking back, it's possible that Elvis's popularity might not have lasted as long if his estate had been financially stable. If Elvis had invested his money wisely, his family might not have had to open his home, Graceland, to the public to make money. They might not have released his old music again or allowed other artists to remake his songs. Without a place for fans to visit and new versions of his music, would Elvis still be as popular today? It's a question we can't answer, but it's an interesting one to think about. In 1982, Priscilla had to take charge of Graceland's management. She asked Jack Sodden for help. Sodden had worked with a friend of Priscilla's who had recently passed away. Priscilla liked Sodden's ideas about Graceland's potential. She also appreciated that he wasn't a fan of Elvis, which meant he could make business decisions without being influenced by his personal feelings. Priscilla thought that a fan might not be able to make tough choices and would instead wonder what Elvis would have wanted. Sodden, on the other hand, would focus on making money. Sodden has been a key person in the Elvis business since then and is now the main representative of Elvis Presley's global ventures. Before Graceland opened, Priscilla and her team spent a year planning. They visited other famous homes and attractions in America to learn from them. They looked at how Disney and the National Park Service handled visitors. They also toured famous homes like Mount Vernon, Monticello, and Biltmore. But what really inspired them was Randolph Hearst's big house in California, called San Simeon. It was kept exactly as it was when Hearst's family lived there. The team decided to model Graceland after this house. Even though visitors could easily walk to the Graceland mansion from the ticket office, they would be taken there in small groups by bus. After the tour, they would be bussed back to the souvenir shops. The guides would be dressed neatly and look like typical Americans. They would be trained to say the same things to every group and to avoid answering any questions that might be tricky. It cost $500,000 to turn Graceland into a tourist attraction. The house needed to be fixed up and made to look like it did when Elvis lived there. Priscilla, Elvis's ex-wife, decided what changes to make. She got rid of the red velvet curtains and furniture and replaced them with white carpets, blue curtains, and gold decorations. The estate didn't have much money left, so Priscilla had to be careful with her spending. She even had to sell tickets in advance to raise money to buy uniforms for the tour guides and other important things. Graceland finally opened to the public on June 7, 1982. The upstairs area where Elvis passed away was not included in the tour, but visitors could see the main living areas and the grounds. When Jack Sodden and Priscilla opened Graceland to the public, they weren't sure how people would react. They were worried, but it turned out they didn't have anything to worry about. On the first day, 3,024 people came to visit Elvis's home, paying $5 each. Sodden said, "Graceland became much more popular than we ever thought it would. They made back the $500,000 they invested in just 40 days. Graceland soon became a very profitable business and a main attraction in Memphis." Priscilla's other valuable asset was the memory of Elvis and his lasting fame. Her business challenge was unusual. Typically, entrepreneurs have to create a product, make it, and then sell it to people who may not be interested. But with Elvis, the situation was reversed. Priscilla already had a well-known brand that many people wanted a part of. Her job wasn't to make people aware of Elvis because he was already famous. She didn't even need to increase the money the brand was making. Instead, she had to take control of the brand and make sure the money it made went to her and her daughter. With the colonel no longer in charge, Priscilla had to stop others from taking a share of the profits that rightfully belonged to Elvis's estate. After Elvis died, his estate faced two big problems. First, they needed to manage their cash flow in the short term. But more importantly, they had to protect Elvis's image and likeness from becoming public property. If that happened, the estate would no longer be able to control or profit from his image. Many unofficial sellers quickly realized they could make money by selling Elvis-themed merchandise. This led to a huge market for commemorative items, with many low-quality products being made and sold without the estate's permission. The estate had little control over this industry, which grew quickly after Elvis's death. Elvis's image and name became public property, used to sell many products. These items were mainly sold in shops near Graceland and at special events. Some strange products included dog food called Love Me Tender Dog Chunks, Always Elvis Wine, and a perfume called Elvis Sweat that came with the slogan Elvis poured out his soul to you, so let his perspiration be your inspiration. Many people bought these souvenirs, but the Elvis estate didn't receive much money from them. The Colonel wasn't thinking about the long-term benefits of the deal with Factors Inc. He mainly wanted to make some quick money. Up until the judge told Factors Incorporated to stop selling Elvis items, the company hadn't done a very good job of controlling how Elvis's image was used. Sometimes they were very strict, and other times they didn't seem to care. Sid Shaw, a British businessman, thinks that Factors Incorporated, the company in charge of overseeing Elvis products, didn't do a good job of controlling what was being sold. Despite this, when Shaw was selling popular Elvis busts in the UK in 1978, he received a letter from a law firm representing Factors. They threatened to sue him unless he stopped selling the busts. Shaw ignored the warning, and shortly after, Factors went bankrupt in the UK. Jack Sodden, who was now in charge of Elvis's business, saw that Sid and other independent sellers were making a lot of money. This made him and Priscilla worried that if they didn't take control, they would miss out on future profits from selling Elvis merchandise. Controlling how the public uses a celebrity's image can be a difficult task. It's a bit of a contradiction. The problem arises when a celebrity culture becomes too widely known. On one hand, this can lead to a loss of control over the culture, causing its original meaning to be lost or disrespected. On the other hand, if the owner tries to control it too much, it can prevent people from feeling a personal connection to the culture, ultimately harming it. The people in charge of Elvis's image had a problem. If they didn't control how his image was used, they would lose ownership of it. But if they controlled it too much, the fans would get upset and lose interest. Priscilla and Jack Sodden, who were in charge, thought that if they protected Elvis's image, the fans would still stay loyal. So they took a strong stance to control how his image was used. They said it was to honor Elvis's memory and remember him in his best years. But what they didn't say directly was that they also wanted to make a lot of money from his image. The people who manage Elvis's memory and image are extremely protective of them, and as a result, Elvis's name is often associated with lawsuits. The company that handles his business, Elvis Presley Enterprises, is considered one of the most aggressive in the industry. Ironically, the image they work so hard to protect wasn't even Elvis's own creation. Most of the songs he sang were written by other people, and he didn't own them. Elvis didn't really own the different images he used, like the Rockabilly Rebel or the Las Vegas Showman. He took these images from other places and mixed them together to create his own persona. He knew that his image was not entirely real. However, even though Elvis's image was a mix of different things, the people controlling his estate today act like it's a single, solid thing that they have control over. Elvis was a laid-back person who didn't mind people copying his style or imitating him. He created his own image by taking bits and pieces from different sources, and he was comfortable with being imitated. However, the people who manage Elvis's estate after he died have a different approach. They have been in a long legal battle with a man named Sid Shaw over souvenir sales. The estate wanted Shaw to pay $50,000 in royalties for each Elvis-themed item he sold in the USA. Since Shaw sold over 300 different products, this would have added up to $15 million. Shaw couldn't afford this, so he refused their offer. He was willing to pay a reasonable royalty fee, but the estate never offered him a fair deal. Shaw said, "I've always been willing to work with them, but they just wanted to make a lot of money, and I got fed up." Shaw decided to confront the opposition head-on and was called to a meeting in New York on March 26, 1985. He was questioned by 3 lawyers, which felt like being under intense interrogation. The meeting wasn't going anywhere until a 4th lawyer arrived with a court order. Shaw felt ambushed and refused to back down. As a result, the estate took him to court to stop him from selling his products in the US. At the trial, Shaw was forced to testify and was even asked about his connection to a humorous British political group, the Monster Raving Loony Party. The turning point in the case came when lawyers showed the court a pair of underwear. They were trying to show that Shaw was disrespecting Elvis by selling underwear with his image on it. Shaw responded by saying that he got the idea from the Beatles, who had sold underwear successfully. He told the lawyers to calm down and not to get upset. However, the joke was not funny to the judge, and it didn't help Shaw's case. Shaw feels he was treated unfairly by the American courts. He was not allowed to sell Elvis souvenirs in the USA, which made him even more determined to do well in other countries. He saw his fights with the Elvis estate as a small person standing up to a big company. He kept his sense of humor, and in the end, he came out on top. When he was taken to court in Britain, the Elvis lawyers did not do very well. Some entrepreneurs gave up when faced with the strong team managing Elvis's estate. However, Jack Sodden, the head of Graceland, was open about his goals and methods. He said that Elvis Presley Enterprises, EPE, just wanted to run its business without others making money from Elvis's image in ways that were not respectful. Sodden compared it to clearing the swamp of low-quality and unauthorized products that used Elvis's name or image. EPE's official statement is similar, but uses more formal language. The company's licensing division is responsible for protecting the Elvis brand and choosing business opportunities that fit with its financial goals and maintain the desired image of Elvis. In 1999, a famous Danish dancer and choreographer named Peter Schofus created a ballet about Elvis's life. The ballet was very popular in Denmark, but just before it was supposed to be performed in Edinburgh and London, Elvis's estate, EPE, said that it wasn't allowed to show Elvis on stage without permission. Schofus had to cancel the show in Edinburgh and make big changes to the ballet before it opened in London. He had to remove 20 songs, including some of Elvis's most famous ones like Heartbreak Hotel and Are You Lonesome Tonight? Schofus met with people from EPE in Los Angeles and decided to change the story of the ballet. Instead of being about Elvis's life, it was now about a person who wants to be like Elvis. The main goal of EPE is to protect its own economic interests. This is not surprising, and it would be irresponsible not to do so. However, using legal powers to threaten court action can be a harsh and expensive approach. It often doesn't achieve its intended goal and can lead to negative public reaction. Even if EPE wins a case, the costs of taking action are often not worthwhile. The company that manages Elvis's business, Graceland, has tried to control how Elvis is remembered and used. They have won many court cases that have allowed them to make money from Elvis's image. However, in the process, they have made many fans unhappy. Some people, like Sid Shaw, think that the company has been too greedy and controlling. Despite the company's efforts, Elvis has become a cultural icon that belongs to everyone. Fans have taken ownership of his memory and created their own tributes and celebrations. For example, every year on the anniversary of his death, thousands of fans gather at his grave with homemade gifts and tributes. However, the company doesn't try to stop them anymore. Instead, they focus on selling official merchandise and tickets to Elvis-themed events, which fans are happy to buy. The company has realized that they can't control how Elvis is remembered, so they have started to work with the fans and celebrate the diversity of Elvis's legacy. They even organize events like Elvis Week, which was originally started by fans. By doing this, the company can still make money from Elvis's image while also allowing fans to celebrate their love for him. Even though Elvis died over 30 years ago, his estate still uses the law to protect his image and legacy. However, it seems that they have learned from past experiences and are now more flexible in their approach. Despite this, there are still many legal battles to fight. One expert, Wall, believes that it would be better to allow more freedom and less control. He thinks that instead of being too strict, owners of popular culture should be more relaxed and give people some leeway. Despite its success, the Elvis Presley estate would not have been able to protect its business interests without the power it gained from earlier court battles and strategies that relied on the law. If EPE hadn't taken action in the 1980s to establish its rights over Elvis's image and culture, it's likely that it would have lost control of important symbols like Graceland and the idea of what Elvis represents today. Without this control, Elvis might have become a generic term and lost its special meaning and cultural value. The strategy used by Jack Sodden and Priscilla Presley was very successful for the business. They controlled certain parts of the Elvis image that they could by law, but also allowed fans to create their own versions of him. As a result, fans have created many different versions of Elvis through things like impersonations, artwork, and online communities. Elvis now has his own global culture that is separate from the official business. The company doesn't try to control this culture unless it affects their profits, and instead lets it evolve on its own.